Welcome to Mormon Book Reviews, where an evangelical encounters the restoration. So I'm very honored to have on the show today a gentleman who, I first encountered him on Facebook, and all of a sudden he seemed to be giving me all this feedback. And I might have had at the time maybe 40 friends on Facebook, and he was liking everything I was doing and everything, and was commenting. And then I was invited to join the Restoration Table, Tony Fieldson's wonderful group, and I got to start encountering his long epistles that he would write and then talk. And I said, well, I just don't have time for this. I just need to get him on Zoom so we can talk. So Nathan, you made quite an impression on me to the point that I asked you to come onto the show. How are you doing today?
I'm great. Thank you so much for having me on. I'm very
So,
excited to be here.
you have a very fascinating story, and I think it's really important to share this with the audience because um, Nathan was an up and coming, I guess you can call him an up and coming apologist within the LDS Church. And one of the things is that he was involved with what what was at the time Fair, but then became Fair Mormon. I think most of you know who I'm talking about, Fair Mormon. And he was a volunteer apologist from the ages of 16 to 18, fielding questions and comments from people who have questions about doctrine, people who are having faith crises, and this 16-year-old sitting there at the other end and helping answer people's questions. So he was very invested in the faith for a very long time and very knowledgeable of the history and the theology of it. And so Nathan, first of all, why don't we just talk briefly about your time at Fair Mormon?
Okay. Yeah. To so I formally joined up with Fair Mormon at the age of I probably would have been 18, actually. Just turned 18. So December 2011. But like 16 and up, I was very invested in studying the history and the theology and the thought of Mormonism and Christianity a little more broadly, because I had sort of encountered this major faith crisis, probably like the biggest, like first biggest one of my life, centered on atonement theology when it came to Jesus, and on particularly Mormon rhetoric about being the only true and living church. So kind of like Mormon exclusivism in that sense. And I would read people like N.T. Wright and the like, and I would keep poking around. I found like Hugh Nibley for the first time in my life, and then eventually I landed on Fair. And I found they had two websites. One was like one for like conference talks and stuff like that. They have an annual conference and they post their presentations there. But the other one was like a Wikipedia style page. And I just remember poring over that for like hours and hours and days. And just being really impressed with to me, especially at that time, the amount of information that they just had on hand, quotes, firsthand primary sources, all this stuff, questions and criticisms I had never even heard of in some cases. And I found I found myself so thoroughly invested in that. And then I found this link that says, hey, you can volunteer to answer people's questions. So I filled out an application, and to join their email list where people can email in questions. And I had sent in a few of my own before, so I kind of knew on that end how it looked. But I signed up to be one of the people who would respond to those. And a couple days later, I woke up to like 100 emails in my inbox, because I had made it on the list. And so I was getting emails of not only people who were sending in questions, but people who were answering them, and then some internal conversations that other people on the email list would have about like how to maybe address this person's question, or maybe like trying to get a clearer idea of what their concern might be. And I ended up doing that until March of 2013, all the way up until I was sent out on my mission.
So what kind of if you were to categorize yourself at Fair Mormon, how would you have described your Mormon faith? Would you have iron rod, or what would you have considered yourself at the time?
Well, I was raised by people who were converts. Like both my parents are converts, both their parents are converts. And I was raised outside of Utah, uh, kind of deliberately so in that sense. So I think I was probably raised in a very religious but pragmatic family. So we had Like my dad was raised on like a corn farm, so very independent, very agrarian, and my mom was raised in a military family and moved around a lot. And so, I think they were both sort of wary of some of the things that maybe more traditional Latter-day Saints might fall into, which is like maybe an unhealthy way of respecting authority figures, or maybe just like an unhealthy reliance upon tradition as opposed to like lived spiritual experience. So I think that I wasn't really raised in a dogmatic family, to be honest. A very open-minded, very conversational family. And I think that that kind of helped. I do remember when I hit my faith crises at 16, I did have a very vocal argument with my dad about atonement theology, because I think most people don't realize that the atonement of Jesus is actually not like this. Well, there might be a little bit of disagreement here, of course, because everyone has their favorite interpretation, or their most meaningful interpretation. But there are several interpretations that have been suggested historically, and Mormonism seems to have inherited some of the more popular Protestant views of like there's a little bit of moral influence theory that Jesus came and lived and died and resurrected as a way of morally influencing us to turn back to Him and to God. There's also a lot of penal substitution, that there was a necessary punitive measure that had to be taken by God to answer human sin, that Jesus, being a perfect sacrifice, volunteers for. And I remember having this sort of philosophical debate with my dad about it. So he was invested with tradition to some degree. I wouldn't call him like a liberal Mormon, but I think there was wiggle room. But I think it was really when I encountered FAIR that I actually really started to come into my own and sort of developed, by way of analogy, maybe more like a Terrell Givens style of Mormonism for myself.
Okay, that's really interesting. Well, Nathan, I just want to thank you so much for coming on today and just telling us so much about your story. So, those of you who are the 17 subscribers to Iconoclast 92, I am going to upload this video onto YouTube for a little while tonight so that Nathan can also watch the video. So, if you think, what is this all about? Probably nobody will see it, but I'm going to have fun because I thought this would be a good opportunity for us to do a test with my new camera and his new microphone. So I just want to like and subscribe, press the notification bell, blah, blah, blah. Thanks again for coming on.
Thank you.